Being wine lovers, we had the opportunity to go to Paso Robles, California to visit 15 wineries in 5 days.
Our great friends, Chris and Carolyn, who'd been there before, spent time planning and mapping out the most perfect trip. Follow along, and during this series, you can journey with us.
In this video, it's day 2, Winery 1, and we visited La Venture Winery,
where our host, Ray, was incredible. Oh my gosh, he spent so much time with us, giving us the lay of the land, and then we actually got to go into the cave, which was incredible. We may have bought a lot of wine here as well.
Yeah, I think we became members of this winery. Is that true?
We did not. Okay. Chris and Carolyn reactivated their membership, but I would not have a problem if we chose to actually join.
There's a good chance that Ray was probably our most passionate host of the entire trip. He just sat there and described everything, and it was really incredible to hear the insights that he offered.
Yeah, and he's totally new to the wine industry, only in the last couple years, so he's embracing it. Cheers.
Cheers.
Day 2, wine stop 1, 9:45 a.m.
Those two people behind us are winos. And they keep following us. They were with us yesterday. We don't know where they came from, but we turned around and there they are again.
Well, welcome to La Venture. So this place is owned by Stephan Asseo and his wife Beatrice. So originally they owned 3 chateaus in France. The most popular one that most people have heard of if you're in wine is Florida Cardinal. So basically, he fell in love with Rhone varietals. He fell in love with Syrah and Grenache and really wanted to mix some Syrah with his Cabernet. But in Bordeaux, you're not allowed to do that. They would have to declassify his winery. So his nice, 40, 50 euro bottles would suddenly be like 7 euro table wine. And it makes it a lot harder to export and things like that. Basically, you would destroy your kind of business. So like any rational human being, he convinced his wife to sell everything that they own and move across the world, just so he could mix 2 grapes, just so he could make the wine that he wanted to make. He checked kind of everywhere and he fell in love with Napa. He decided to move over here, didn't speak any English, which again is insane, with 3 kids as well. So they went over to Napa and started looking at properties and realized that he didn't really love the valley floor. If you look around us, we've got about 57 acres planted here, and you've got all these different hills. You've got great exposures, different sunlights, different soils. In Napa, if you've visited, it's sort of kind of just this big kind of cavernous valley. Really great vineyards kind of up in the mountainside, but he just didn't have enough money for those vineyards. There's only 7 great ones, and I'm sure they're worth billions of dollars. So he met 2 French winemakers there from Opus One, Dominus. Hung out with them for a bit, and they suggested he come and look down here. Fell in love with this property. It was originally a barley farm and a horse farm. So that little flat place that we have right over here to the side used to be the horse rink. And because horses are in there with manure and stuff, that's actually our least favorite plot because it's so fertile. And that was back in 1996 that it was planted. So it's been, a while, and it is still not where we want it to be. Everything else around us was pretty much barley, so that was all removed, and Stephan began planting. And that's kind of the story of how we ended up here. So this first wine on your left-hand side is the Optimus. It's named for Dominus and Opus One, the 2 guys that led him here. And then, so give that a shot. That was the table wine which he dreamed of, the Cabernet mixed with Syrah. So wine here, especially here in Paso, is all about blending. You know, he's a great blender, and that's what we like to do in the cellar, is take different wines and try to make something bigger and more interesting than just a single varietal. By adding just 1 or 2% of a different grape into your wine, you can totally change the mouthfeel, the taste, make it brighter and wider. You can also ruin it. So it takes a lot of practice.
It's like,
So Stephan hates technology. He doesn't hate science, but he doesn't always listen to the science. So over here, I came in last year and I get to do, my main job is like doing lab work on basically the grapes in the vineyard, just like tracking maturity. And then the same thing with the wine, tracking fermentation, things like that. And I would track maturity and he would often just disagree with the science. And usually he was right, because he's tasting. So, you know, you might be like, well, yeah, like on paper, like in a textbook, yeah, the grape is perfectly ripe and should be picked right now, but I think it can go a little bit longer. Or pick a little bit early, because, you know, he'd taste it and he'd be like, it's already getting ready, we should pick it now and not wait.
So he walks around just tasting.
That's his barometer.
Yeah, so Patrick's our assistant winemaker. Patrick drives around basically all day doing that. Dave's our
Really?
vineyard
Wow.
manager. He drives around all day doing it. Stephan drives around kind of all day doing it. So we've got a ton of different blocks and different exposures, and the top of the hill tastes different than the bottom of the hill. So everybody is doing that. I'll usually go around and I get a bucket full of grapes, and then I will, you know, crush them down so it becomes juice and let the sediment fall out, and then run lab work on them while they're actually tasting the grapes. I mean, I get to taste it too, but I don't understand it like they do.
What did you go to school? Like, what were your studies? Was it
Oh, I'm a retired computer guy.
computer?
I retired a couple of years ago and moved here, and didn't really even like wine at the time. I just drink it to get drunk.
there we go. Hey, honesty that's what we love.
Yeah, there's going to be some honesty, so that's
That's exactly what we want.
No, I would just drink wine to get drunk. But then, you know, with the industry being here, the people that I fell in love with all worked in the industry. And since I was essentially had nothing to do and retired, I'd be like, well, can I help you do anything? And it started like fixing people's printers and doing things like that, doing some like super, right?
Can you build me a website?
Well, fixing their website, I'm not doing that work anymore.
Right.
But then it was, can you help prune? I'm like, I don't know how, but I can, sure, absolutely. And I'd show up and they would like that. And then it would be bottling, which is awful work and it's hard getting people to bottle. I'd be happy to go out and then covering some tasting room shifts, and it kind of continued.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, I learned that there's actually a full wet chemistry lab in every great winery. Not in all wineries, but in every great one there should be. So I decided, like, let's do it. Let's figure it out. And then as time went on, you know, you develop a palate and you start to appreciate it and love it. And now I'm obsessed. Learning from people that were around me. And then that's where kind of Stephan came in, and I was lucky enough that he thought that I'd be teachable. Like on day one, I came to meet him for the very first time. And we were talking about fermentation. And, you know, by this time I'd already worked 2 harvests. And Grenache usually, like basically the fermentation on that is a lot longer, twice as long. Most people are taking 30 to 45 days to do their Grenache. And Stephan's like, it takes like 2 weeks. And I'm like, why? And like, he immediately like grabbed the whiteboard and like started like basically breaking down sugar molecules. And basically there's a different sugar type in Grenache than there is in the other grapes. So you use different yeast. And it seems like nobody else knows this, but he did. And he was willing to teach me the very first day that he met me. And he was like, I'm very busy, I don't have time. We can only talk about this for like an hour. And I'm like, all right.
I'll take it.
Wow.
Like he's just so willing to kind of teach everybody. He came back in 1996. There weren't a lot of vineyards at the time. There were probably about 30. And so Booker over on that side, as well as pretty much every other winemaker would come here to learn from Stephan. He's classically trained in both winemaking and in farming. And that's really important. You know, he'll say all the time that he's not really a good winemaker, but he's a great farmer. And I think that's not quite true, but whatever he believes. So Optimist is the first one. And then on the opposite end, not following the list, we have the Estate Cuvée. And I always like smelling them side by side. Now, right now I'm pouring different vintages for you. I'm pouring the 17 State Cuvée and the 18 Optimus. But these wines are always very similar in percentages. And I think it's just interesting. I mean, that kind of shows you like how drastic something can be different while how similar it can actually be. So like a banana has 7 esters, which are basically smell compounds. Wine usually has about 200 esters.
Oh, wow.
So your nose in normal life, when you're smelling oranges and bananas and nature around you, you're talking 15, 20 esters at most. Kind of like building up these scents and these memories in your brain. And then suddenly you get to wine and there's 200. And that's why when you sit there and you can smell and like, oh, I smell this and that. I'm the resident learning scientist. So Patrick, our assistant winemaker, has a really great background. I think it was Texas A&M. In farming and science. Dave, our vineyard manager, very science-based as well. I mean, making wine is a lot of science. Well, growing is a lot of science. The wine making is a little bit less. If you're going to make wine like us, we don't do too much to our wine. Kind of put it in a tank. We use a temperature is, I think, our biggest strength. A lot of, like when you go to school for winemaking, it's kind of like a big pharma. Like they start on day one, like teaching you about all the things that you can add to wine. All these chemicals and things that you can buy and use in the industry to make different things happen. We don't do much of that.
Right. Okay.
It's funny. So every winery next to their wet chemistry lab is usually their chemicals that they use. We have those chemicals.
Right.
They are crusty and the boxes haven't been opened in years. And I'm like, they're kind of cool. Yeah. Oh, they're very expired. Like you go in the fridge, there's like yeast nutrients, and I'm like, this expired like 6 years ago. Clearly, we're not using these things.
Yeah.
You know, not to say that we won't use anything, but the reality is if your harvest is great, your grapes are good, you're paying attention, usually you don't have to use too much. Fermentation is a natural process. So we kind of just let that go. We use temperature as our big thing. And we don't even really, like a lot of wineries will use a lot of chemicals to clean and stuff. We don't even do that. We really just kind of use water, like just cold water out of our tap system here, which is natural well water. We kind of believe in like a biome, right? Yeah. So if we keep everything clean and taken care of here in this vicinity, bad things won't come in. If you make a mess, immediately clean it up. That's kind of like our philosophy. A lot of wineries, if you're doing something and you spill and make a mess, you finish what you're doing and then you come clean up your mess. We kind of do it reverse. If you stop whatever you're doing, you clean up your mess, you spray out the drains, you stop sugar from accumulating, and you stop bacterial growth like immediately. It's kind of what we do. So the State Cuvée, depending on the year, 2018 it was a 100-point wine from multiple places. It's sort of, it's Stephan's wine really.
Yeah.
So he picks his favorites from each of his favorite kind of blocks of grapes, and we make that. So I think everybody has like a different perspective. Like if you're going to do mass wine production, like huge quantities, we don't. We're like 10,000 cases. But if you're doing 500,000 cases or something, all that science is great. You probably need that. You're dealing with millions of dollars in a single tank.
Right.
So having that science, I think, is great there. And I just think it's a different product.
Got it.
Right, so I love Coca-Cola, and there's nothing wrong with Coca-Cola, and you get Coca-Cola anywhere in the world and it tastes the same. That's awesome. It's also not what we want to make for our wine. I don't think there's anything wrong with those wineries that do want to do that, as long as their marketing is clear on what they are and their price point matches what they are. I think that's, just different worlds. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to go into that mass production wine world, the big yellow companies, the Constellation brands, then that science background's great. Going to school for just winemaking is awesome. What I like to do is I like smaller boutique wineries. I like working with people, like winemaker people, and producing a couple tons of this, a couple tons of that, experimenting and playing. You don't get to do that in those big winery situations. So I have Patrick, which is the school-trained person. He's like, if something's wrong, you can add this chemical. Like this morning we were talking about distillation, and if you distill finished wine, there's a small amount of sulfur in all wine, like less than 1%, but it'll come through a lot on your distilled product. He's like, well, you can just use a couple of drops of hydrogen peroxide to knock out that sulfur. I knew that, but those are the kinds of things that he knows, like just off the top of his head. He reads the science. Stephan likes to read the grapes, a lot of taste, things like that. So he had just his worlds of experience, and I think I've not talked to him about this, but I'd be willing to bet that he knew all the stuff that Patrick knew from school.
Mm-hmm.
But over the years of experience, he no longer like needs to think about that. Like it's back there in his mind somewhere, but he is just instinct at this point.
So if there are 3 vineyards in the Paso area that you shouldn't miss, what would those 3 be?
All right. So my favorite winery right now is a place called Top Winery. They've got a little kind of warehouse building over on the 46 East. So they don't have their own vineyard, but they're buying some of the absolute best fruit. Very natural fermentations. And he's that guy like we were talking about before with no science background at all in wine. He doesn't know how to make an addition. He doesn't know why you would even want to learn that. He is just like he does his punch downs himself because he feels that he needs to put his own energy in the grapes to make great wine. And it is really, really great pure wine. And his palate is so good. So he's blending these different vineyards from different areas and he just comes up with something awesome. Top TOP. Next, I'd go to Toblis Creek. So Toblis, he's kind of a legend. Neil is a legend. A lot of what's going on here in Paso. So he was here before Stephan. And I'm sure Stephan went over there to learn how to do stuff as well. Just great, interesting wines, definitely lighter in style than ours, but they teach really well. They've got I think they're fully biodynamic now. So there's animals running around everywhere. It's just a great experience. And then Turtle Rock. So Turtle Rock is run by Don Burns, who's Saxon's assistant winemaker. Saxon's one of the top wineries. So he's the assistant winemaker and has been for a very long time. And Turtle Rock is over in Tin City. And I mean, I love Saxon, but for me, Turtle Rock is a little bit more like fruit forward, which is kind of similar in style to ours, I would say. I definitely would stop by Turtle Rock. They do a rosé, which is excellent, tickled pink. I don't know, it's just different than a lot of the other wines. You can tell that the quality is just beyond excellent. So each of our wines are, I would say, I think they're named more of an idea than a particular thing. So a lot of wineries you're going to go to, like this is our GSM. We'll say like GSM on the bottle. So process of making wine. So we pick the grapes when they're ready, meaning that the acids are kind of where we want them to be at their peak, and sugars are hopefully high enough so that we get like a decent alcohol content. So we pick the grapes and then we go through the sorting process. And then they immediately go into stainless steel for fermentation. So these are big stainless steel vats. Some people do it in plastic bins, but you don't ferment in oak. I did a little side project this year where I did ferment in oak, in a neutral oak, just for the fun of it. But generally that's going to be done in either stainless steel or plastic. So once it's fermented, we do a thing called extended maceration. Basically, we taste the wine every 2 days, and we're still adjusting the heat to kind of extract more flavor during this. So all the juices, it's wine at this point. So all the wine is with the skins, and we're just tasting every 2 days, kind of seeing it progress. When it's done progressing, then what we'll do is we'll drain the tank, and we'll put all the juice into barrels. Now, this is where we vary a little bit from other people. A lot of wineries will just leave it in barrel until they're ready to bottle, and about a month before bottling, they'll go ahead and blend it together. We let it sit in oak for about 3 or 4 months, then we blend it together, put it back in oak, and then that's kind of our process.
And when you say blend it together,
we basically ferment in different sort of blocks, or what we think will co-ferment some things, but generally blocks of grapes will ferment. Get them in oak for a little bit, let them settle. Then we'll start the blending process. So they'll come up with they're not the very final blends. I'm sure they will go in at the end and touch them up if needed. But really, everything is done in barrel, and then it just kind of sits there for about a year.
So while it's sitting for a year, nobody's nipping it.
No, we're nipping it. Generally, that's me.
You can't just sit there. You got to be testing it.
So every 2 months, you have to go in and you have to add SO2, which prevents oxidation of your wine, prevents spoilage, and then you have to top it. So basically, wine is evaporating, so you've got to refill it about a bottle, one bottle's worth of wine every 2 months or so. So you go in there and you top them all, and usually I'm drinking them as well.
Right.
I gotta make sure.
You gotta
make sure everything is going on the path that it needs to go.
Right.
is there any other type of barrels that you experiment with other than oak?
Well, it depends. So we have the amphora, which is not a different type of wood, but amphora is a red clay pot.
Okay.
I believe ours are made in Italy. Generally, they have a round bottom, and the kind of the theory on it is the wine, the lees never really settle, so it's kind of moving. And then with the clay, it also allows oxidation all around the wine at a very low level, so you're allowing it to age. We put some stuff in stainless steel. In kegs, basically to stop it from doing anything, and we can use that for topping or use it for freshness on our whites. And then we've got concrete, which are kind of, I'll show you a photo inside, but they're about 8 foot tall, 7 foot tall concrete cylinders, similar to amphora but different. And then we use oak, just French oak. Technology has gotten to the point where you can go in and design your own concrete tank, and you can basically how porous the concrete is. You can kind of adjust the shape. So as technology gets better, it's becoming one more thing that you can do to your wine to customize it essentially. And there's eggs, there's like glass eggs. If I make another wine next year, I want to use eggs. They have clear glass ones, they have plastic ones, they have concrete ones. So each medium allows for different things. So, plastic doesn't allow in much oxidation, which is, it's not quite as porous. And then each of the other ones has their own benefits and detractors as well.
So with one of your side projects, did you ever impress Stephan? Or you said, taste this, and he was like, oh my gosh.
I think that's always the hope. So this was my first side project this year, and Stephan was gracious enough to gift me the grapes. So it finished fermenting, and I brought him a sample to taste. And this is the first time he had tasted it. And we're in that little room right there where we taste for the extended macerations. And he took a sip and he walked over to a planter by the door,
I can see
spit it in the planter, and then walked away. About a month later, he tasted the final fermentation. He said, "Oh, you did a good job." But when it had just finished, he was not. I don't know. I don't know if he wasn't impressed or was impressed.
Oh.
It was a complete,
Poker face.
he just spit it into a bush and walked away. Not even a bush outside, just like a planter. So, yeah, it's intimidating.
How old is he now?
I think he is a little younger than 70.
And you've been here for a year. How long have you been in
This is my
Paso?
second year. I've only been in Paso for about 4 years.
Okay.
And I'm now going my second year.
And did you work at any other, other than just helping out here and there?
Yes. Beforehand I did, well, no, it was still just helping out part-time. So I did part-time harvest work, which isn't real harvest work. Harvest is, 12 plus hours a day, 7 days a week. The previous places I was helping part-time, so I'd work 3 days a week or 4 days a week because it doesn't pay much and it's a real commitment. And then once I really got into the science stuff, I wanted to find a great winery to work with.
Yep.
Luckily, I applied with Justin Smith and Don Burns from Turtle Rock, and they didn't have a spot for me, so they said, there's this guy Stephan, he needs somebody, you might be a great fit there. And Stephan called me on the phone that day.
Wow.
I didn't even send a resume. He just called me. He's starts talking to me. He's like, "You're going to come. You're going to learn. You're going to do these things." He's like, "I will not pay you." He's like, "Oh yeah, do you even want this job?" That was the last thing he said. I was like, "I think so. I think I want to come in and meet you." So
that's so cool.
He came in. He's a really great guy. I mean, it's very much a family affair. Chloe is the general manager. She's over in that office. Stephan is the winemaker. Beatrice, his wife, takes care of feeding us all, and she's incredible. She used to help on the sorting table and still does on occasion and run the business. Son Julian owns a restaurant in town, and I think Beatrice also owns a little boutique in town. So, and everybody who's worked here has worked here for years. I'm the youngest person.
Wait, Joe, you shaved your soul patch.
Oh yeah, I used to look just like that.
This is Joe's sandwich place. Joe's, they just opened.
Tell us about Ike's, for real.
Oh, Ike's is a branch that have 80 locations within California, and they make this amazing double Dutch bread. You have to try it. They're over in Templeton. They just opened today, so check them out.
So this is my favorite one. So this is actually not the for her. It's my favorite wine that we make. So a lot of the wines, you know, you guys seen the list, there's a lot of blending going on. But for her, there's not as much blending. It's all done in the vineyard. So we've got this great little hilltop. And on that hilltop, we've got Syrah and Graciano. And these two grapes, they don't ripen at the same time. So through farming, they kind of manipulate so they can be picked at the exact same time. So we kind of green prune, so we'll cut off some of the grapes that are green early on, so it'll speed up the ripening process for the Graciano. And then the Syrah, we just kind of leave alone. So we try to make the Graciano match up to the Syrah. And then we'll go ahead and pick them at the same time, and we'll co-ferment them. So basically, it's for Stephan's wife, and I think, at least the story in my mind, and I don't know if it's the actual story, it's these two grapes that don't really usually grow together, that are put together, that are always blended together, basically from start to finish. They never leave each other's side. And that kind of reminds me of Stephan and Beatrice, because this has been one crazy, love and tour, one crazy adventure, and she has stuck with him through the entire thing. So this is one of the Ember wines. It's my favorite wine. It's my favorite wine to get a chance to work on, because to me it just smells so great in the tank. And then also through the farming and just the whole process. To me, it's my favorite wine.
This wine doesn't tell the truth.
Is that what it says?
It says it lies.
Oh.
Lies means lees. In French, lees is lies.
Right.
How is this temperature controlled down here?
I believe they have an air conditioning system put up, but
Okay.
it doesn't turn on.
Okay.
It's just naturally cooled.
Is it? Yeah, because it's
We're about
underground.
30 feet underground, and so all just vines.
Wow.
So these are the amphoras, and these are the concrete. And each one's sort of labeled. So for 2020, we're gonna do a special Grenache, single varietal. Last year we did a single block of Syrah. These are, these stainless steel and iron glass tanks. That's what you ferment in. So you're asking about fermentation. Those are smaller versions of the ones that we use. These will be like holding, so you can put this in there to like basically produce oxygen and make sure the wine stays nice and fresh. So that is our soil.
Wow.
You can touch it and feel it, and you'll notice it's moist.
How does that happen?
Well, the limestone basically absorbs the water and just sort of holds onto it. And you've probably heard people talk about stressing grapes. You try to stress them to make the fruit better. Well, what happens is the soil here, I guess it's not so much soil, it's more rock, will hold onto that liquid, and the vines will just kind of find little fissures and kind of break its way down the juice.
I remember in the old tasting room they had the samples.
Yes, we still have them out there. The towers of the content all broken up.
Like the names on these, so is that the barrel maker?
Yes.
Okay, so I
That
told
is
you
the
some
cooperage.
French.
Yeah, they're all French.
So they all have a little bit of a different taste or impact on the wine, no?
Very different. Yeah, very, very, very different. We actually do a tasting once a year every February, where we invite the coopers in and we put the estate cuvee in each barrel, and we taste it out of each barrel and we grade the barrels.
And how long does it sit in that barrel?
When they do the test for a while, like it's full process, I guess, almost.
Okay, we're leaving La Adventure with cases of wine. Not cases, but bad enough, right?